Hello and welcome to Heart and Health. My name is James and I will be hosting tonight, joined as usual by Cheryl. Cheryl, it was Father's Day this weekend after we record. How was that for you?
It was probably slightly different. I am fortunate enough that my dad is still about, but my ex-husband passed away when my son was 6. So we had a slightly different Father's Day in the sense that obviously he's not here to visit, but we still celebrated him. We obviously know it's coming every year. We still make a big thing of it. But what we did do, which was lovely, is spend time in Edinburgh with both our families. So we hung out with my mum and dad, and then we went and hung out with Pete's mum and dad, and we remembered him and we celebrated him. And for a day that probably could have been quite difficult, James, it was actually rather lovely. Thank you very much. I hope you were spoiled by your crew, were you?
It's a little bit different for me. My children were with their mother. I started the day with my partner and her children, but I had to leave early doors from a holiday to go to work. So I worked all day. My children were my clients, and they were all very grateful because they paid me handsomely for their services. But later on, when I did get home, I had a lovely card from the stepchildren, as they will be. And yeah, I think Maria's ordered me something to arrive later in the week, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, just interesting from what you said, like Father's Day and Mother's Day and these sort of things can mean different things to different people. And we all know a father, I suppose, or we have one, or we become one, some of us, or a mother, and equally for Mother's Day. And it's not always going to be a shiny, bright celebration. And I always think it's important just to, when you are, sharing your expressing your sentiments towards people, that we also like sort of be aware that other people might find it so difficult. So to check on those who might not find it so easy sometime on those days is always a good thing to do. But we will also then move on, Cheryl, to think about the previous episode with Stevie talking about his gambling habits in the penny arcade. How did you find the response to that episode?
Do you know the response has been absolutely brilliant, and I have got some comments here that I would like to share from our YouTube page in response to it. So the first one was from A McMenemy 5647. Living with addiction is horrendous. You're in a constant state of panic and anxiety. There is also a ripple effect on your loved ones. Well done, Stevie. I'm sure tonight's pod helped some people out there. Yeah, absolutely. I had another one that I've picked from Fraser B151. Fantastic show, and I have no doubt that it will help numerous people that recognise the signs discussed in this podcast. I have so much respect for Stevie coming on and sharing this. It's great to see. I love this bit. It's great to see that he has so many things in life that now give him purpose, satisfaction, and happiness. Well done, Stevie, and a great show, the three of you. And my last one, I think, just sums up what everybody felt. Stevie, well done for speaking about your problem. It's nothing short of fantastic. I doff my cap to you. And that's from Joseph McClure.
That's good. And Cheryl just said that our YouTube page, what she's referring to is the Four Lads YouTube page. And I've also got some comments from the Heart and Hand patron. I have to say the overwhelming praise for Stevie to talk about this and bring it to listeners who may need to hear it was honestly like unanimous. Like incredible praise for Stevie. I'm sure Stevie doesn't need to go trawling through the comments to feel that. It was a really fantastic and important share from him. I'm very grateful for his time that he gave us that. But first of all, Alex on the Patreon the Heart and Hand Patreon page says that was absolutely brilliant and a fantastic listen. Thank you to Stevie for that and speaking so openly. Certainly, some of the things he said really related with me and people within my life. Thanks again. And Johnny Mitchell says, a great listen, and I really appreciate how honest Stevie was with opening up about a subject I have my own demons with. Best wishes, Stevie. Now I really like that, because we say when I record these sort of things, or me and Cheryl are planning it, like if we can affect one person, then this is worth doing. Well, I think from the comment sections in both platforms and Twitter as well, X, sorry, that we use, there's a lot of people who are feeling the impacted and connecting to this sort of content. I'm really, really proud already, I suppose, Cheryl, for us both, that we've been able to do that in such a short space of time with this concept. So thank you everyone for the comments. And there is one last comment, and it's the important saga of my arm wrestling ability, which I'll keep referring to as long as people write about it. Roy Donlan says, Christ, I don't know what voice this sounds like, an Aberdeenshire
Yeah.
accent, but I'm not going to do one. Christ, some size of a loon. James versus Davy Graham, arm wrestle, please. Now, I've heard Davy Graham's voice, and it's quite intimidating. So I'm not sure. He might be the one to finally beat me, knock me off my pedestal. I've never met him. I've never seen him. I've certainly heard that he has some size to back him up. So watch this space, maybe at a Heart and Hand live show coming to you soon. Okay, we will move on then, Cheryl, to just think about quickly about our guest for the show today. And we'll be welcoming David Edgar, head honcho, Heart and Hand, the man himself, to talk about his experiences of alcohol and specifically alcoholism. And we are on the addiction train again with this episode, Cheryl. And what's alcohol been like for you? I suppose what to just catch quickly before Davey joins us.
I think it's that Scottish thing, isn't it? Of the culture of getting as hammered as you can very quickly. That has been ingrained within us, within parents, within grandparents for such a long time. So probably like a lot of people, I started drinking in my early teens. I wasn't very good. I was a very emotional drunk. You might know this, James, as James was lucky enough to get some half-cut voice messages from me on Saturday night as I waited for my bus home. But yeah, I think like a lot of people that there is just that culture of really going for it. And that's what I think a lot of us grew up around. So I do not have any addiction issues around alcohol at all, but I do know I have watched people around me struggle with alcohol addiction, and I know how dangerous it can be and how, as we're going to discuss with David, how it can not only affect your life, but the lives of people around you as well.
Yeah, and I think for me, this is probably a lot closer to home. I think I was introduced to alcohol very, very early in terms of how I raised my children. Like I was introduced to alcohol quite young. It was around me. I don't think it was necessarily around me in a harmful or necessarily an addictive way, but certainly my children have not been exposed to alcohol in the way that I was exposed to alcohol in terms of trips to the pub, and I think it was more normal back 30 years ago and before. But this exposure for me is part of the reason why in my early 20s I was sinking 50-pint weekends in an obesity and stress and struggling anxiety spiral in my early 20s. This was not a good path that I was on. It was getting more and more and more, sitting in the house to drink 6 to 10 cans of really strong cider, to watch football highlights and place bets and these sort of things. Going to the Rangers games in the early days, coming from Carlisle, or traveling from Carlisle, I should say, on the buses, the Stoke bus, the Blackpool bus, notorious drunken buses and more. And, you know, I was drinking a bottle of whiskey to a game. This was the norm for me. 6 bottles of Miller from when I moved to Glasgow from Cessnock to Hibs. You know, I was sinking a lot of alcohol, and nowadays this is a much more rarer affair. I haven't been drunk in 4 years.
Oh,
And that
wow.
feels like a much healthier place for me to be. I did drink 2/3 of a bottle of champagne this weekend, which is a lot by my standards, but the reasons were quite special that I may refer to later on. But this is occasional now. You know, when people, how often do you drink? You get this question, how frequent? And my answer is occasional, as in if there is an occasion, I'll have more than one. It may be common for me to have one a little bit more often. On a hot summer's day working in the garden, there's nothing like a cider for me still. I still really enjoy it. I do not have to restrict myself from it for a dangerous reason, but more for like a blood sugar reason, or the impact to me in terms of anxiety is still so very strong. So 2 days ago, I drank champagne, and the anxiety I've experienced today is crippling at times. So that is the worst effect. And the less I drink, the more I feel that impact when I do. So having more than one for me is just, it's not healthy, it's not reasonable unless I get into a significant sort of celebratory mode where one can lead to 2 and 3, depending on what you're experiencing. And I'm a bit of a guilty one that I like to finish a bottle. That's why I had 2/3 of a bottle of champagne, because we spent 30, 40 pounds on it, and I wish to finish it. But for some people, that can be more harmful than others. I'm really excited to speak to Davey. I've wanted to do this conversation for such a long time. But listen to Davey, like I've said, on this on Patreon elsewhere for 12 years or more, probably since he started doing these podcasts. And he's often referred to this at different times in humorous or more serious tones. And I've always wanted to have this conversation. And it's one for me, if I'm in the comment section, this will really relate to me and aspects of my history and I guess friends' lives that I've seen as well. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. Davey's going to join us just now. And here he is. David, thank you very much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, nice to be on. And the summer, of course, we get a bit of time to take stock when Rangers go a bit quieter. So it's nice to do something a bit different.
No, yeah, exactly. And that's what this project or this sort of show, I always wanted it to be something for the off season. So thank you very much for airing it and also for giving us a chance to let you appear as well. I think the World Cup's on. You've just been over at NASA. And between those two things, Scottish people are consuming a hell of a lot of alcohol. So it's a hell of a place to start. But I actually want to come really early with you if I could, because I was just talking about it in the introduction myself. Just thinking about what was your introduction to alcohol at probably the youngest stage of your life?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because my parents don't drink. Well, my dad does very, very, very occasionally, but not much when I was a child. And my mum's a teetotaler. But we had a large and close-knit family, and there was alcoholism, I now realise, around. And there was, always family parties. My granddad, or Papa, as we call it in Ayrshire, he would, be off to the boozer. He lived at the bottom of the road from us with my gran, and it was always about. And from a child, I was fascinated by pubs and by that sort of because it was a very sort of traditional culture. Like I remember a family parties where the men would arrive with these enormous carriots that you could float a battleship on, of slabs of lager and bottles of spirits, with baby sham and sherry for the women, and the kids would get sent to bed about 10 or 11 or whatever it was, and then you'd get up in the morning early because you're a kid, and my uncles are all still there sitting, going into it. So I was always attracted to it. And of course, the thing about alcohol is it's not the problem, and that might sound odd to people who haven't experienced addiction. Alcohol or gambling or drugs or whatever, they're just symptoms of the condition of the ism. And I think that, looking back, I can see that now. But I think some people sometimes try to look at things like addiction and say, there must have been some trauma or some moment that caused it. And there really isn't. I had a very loving childhood. My parents are wonderful, and were totally wonderful. We didn't have a lot of money, but they spent a lot of time with us, and I never felt poor and never felt that we'd gone without or anything. And I know that, they looked after us a lot better than the parents of some of my friends did back then. It's a miswire in my brain that a lot of people experience. But yeah, I think I was always very that sort of lifestyle. And then when I was, my first drink when I was 14, and when I was 14, I sort of, fell in love with music, giddles, and drink, drugs, all that sort of stuff. And I was always very, into that sort of rock and roll thing and that whole doomed, the doomed glamour of it, and quite fascinated by it. So I think, as I say, I had a predilection to it, but I don't think it's possible to, certainly when I was growing up, to grow up in the west coast of Scotland and not see alcohol almost on a daily basis, because it was about.
Yeah, do you know what, David? I grew up on the East Coast, but your story is remarkably close to what I described to James when he asked about my relationship with alcohol and when I was introduced to it, etc. Because it was very much a family thing. It was very much a Scottish culture of let's all go to somebody's house for an occasion, let's get absolutely hammered. And like you, I was put to bed, and then you would get up in the morning, and there would be, at that point for me, it was the wine bladders from the boxes of wine that were left the next again morning, like almost like a wee silver pillow waiting for you when you came downstairs the next again morning. But can I ask, something you said really interested me there? Your parents' attitude to alcohol was probably slightly different from mine, and a lot of people's parents as well. My parents had no problem with alcohol at all, but they did drink, you know, they very much partook in it. How did your parents, as they weren't drinkers, how did they respond to that culture? They were obviously part of it, but didn't overindulge.
I think my mum has always been teetotal, and I think a big part of that was she saw, as I say, I would probably class now my granddad as a functioning alcoholic, but he drank every day. I had two uncles who are alcoholics. One died from his alcoholism because he never recovered from it. So my mum had seen it and had seen the effect of it on her family, if you like, and she hated it. And I think when my dad and her got together, my dad, as we joke and go in, and he's an immigrant. He's from Londonderry. And when they got together, my mum was very, I think, you know, a couple of times my dad went out with her brothers and was legless. And my mum just basically said, I am not having this life. And it's, you know, that's just a total deal breaker for me. And my parents are, you know, the two of them are just absolutely devoted to each other and always have been, and to their kids. I don't mean it was to the exclusion of us or anything. So my dad was like, okay, and he would take a beer here and there, but it was rare. And again, you know, as I say, you know, we weren't from a particularly you know, rich area or anything. There wasn't a lot of money in the house, but we always seemed to have a nicer house than, you know, people around us. And I realised as I got older that was because they didn't socialise, they didn't smoke, they didn't go out. And I think that, you know, that it's a strange dynamic in that there was a lot of alcohol in my immediate family, but not with my, you know, with my parents.
Yeah, I think I'd probably say, okay, I can hear those dogs, David. They're always very popular on the show. The family is probably for most people be the first place. I know I grew up in an era where everyone met up on the streets, went out to have bonfires, and we got absolutely steaming. It was the Lambrini bottles, crates of Carling, and it was all going absolutely mental. But as a teenager, you've no concept of that becoming a problem. You're just doing what everyone else does a lot of the time, and usually you're out drinking your family members, I think, at that stage. But I've heard you speak about before how the era around university and maybe going into work started to change a little bit from a social culture to something that was a bit, was it more dependent, or am I getting my timelines wrong there for you?
Again, it's slightly strange for me because I never thought in those terms. I loved everything about drink. I loved, you know, carrots. I loved going down the aisle in the supermarket, different beers, you know, and I always felt just complete. I think one of the things about alcoholism is that the way I always describe it is that I was born 2 pints shy. You know, I never really felt kind of part of things. I always felt a bit of an outsider. And at school, and this is going to sound really bad, and I don't mean it to, but I remember once my head teacher told my parents, David's clever, and obviously at school, clever isn't cool. And basically a lot of these kids were training for a factory and he's going to do something different. And I always felt a bit different, you know, and I wasn't into the same stuff as other kids. I mean, obviously football, thankfully, kept me in, but I was always interested in other things. So once I got a drink, then that was it. Everything seemed to me, I suddenly had this confidence. I didn't feel like an outsider. I didn't feel, you know, like awkward in a room so long as I had the booze. But I just thought that was natural. And that's the thing about looking back. I also had that Scottish thing of, I can drink a lot, and therefore that makes me a man. Therefore, that makes me admirable. It's something that my friends, you know, would all say about, oh, you know, David, he can take a good drink, you know, can drink anybody under the table. So there was almost a sort of pride in it.
I think it improves your social status, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And again, just on that, I looked older, so I was able to get, the carryouts for people as well. And that's at that age, that's a big thing. So for me, it sort of went going up the park and being one of those kids that people tell their kids not to go near, sitting with and it wasn't just drink, at that stage. And it horrifies me now, but at 14, I thought I knew everything. There are times I actually wish I had the confidence now that I had then. But when you're a teenager, you're a monster. And, there was drink, there was drugs. And we just, we're too cool for school. We thought we were, the really cool ones. And we were into the coolest music and we went to the coolest places. And then going to university was an extension of that. And again, it was mid-90s, Britpop culture, laddish culture. It was all about drinking and having a good time and, Oasis and Blur and all that sort of thing. So, you go to university and, the university I went to had a student union that had 8 levels, something to do and drinks promos on constantly. And it was acceptable to do it. It was sort of almost understood that that's what you do. And again, and I really want to stress this, I don't want anybody to think I'm coming on here and say, oh, drinking, drugs are evil, and if you take them, your foot will fall off. I had a lot of good times when I had a lot of wonderful nights. I had a lot of shit ones too, because that was the nature of it, and I would fall out with people and I would hurt people. But I would also have nights where it was just perfect and everything was great and everything was wonderful. It's not in any way, because people feel awkward around people who've recovered, because I think it makes them think about their own, drinking and whatnot. And it's a question I'll get a lot, is people will say to me a couple of beers in, they'll go, you probably think I'm an alcoholic, don't you? And I'll go, no, I don't, but you're clearly having some worries about it. And I think that it is that, as I say, that Scottish thing of, well, this is what we do. And I think it is noticeable with younger people now that they don't. Like my nephews, that the stuff that they do is nowhere near. At that age, in my teens, it was, I want to get out of it. I want to get hammered, and that's all I want to do. And all my mates were the same, and everyone I knew was the same. But then, as I say, I think it's noticeably changing now.
Yeah. And again, that there's so many parallels, David, because like you, I went to uni. I had the thing of the football as well, which was obviously massive for you. I actually worked in that 8-level student union as well.
Did you?
I did, yes, I did. I worked in the sports bit of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, I'm far, far younger than you, so our paths.
Yes.
Yes, we'd have never crossed.
Yeah, that'd be what it was.
You told us that you were a teenager, you then went to uni. So that was all kind of, I suppose, if you think about it, rites of passage, acceptable times to have a drink. That was what was expected of you. Everybody else was doing it. But is there a time that you can think now that you look back at and realise that recreational use had become something more serious?
Oh, yeah, now I can look back and see it for what it was. I think the thing with addiction that people don't realise, if you haven't and you don't understand it, I sincerely hope you never do, because I sincerely hope it never affects you or a family member. But it is all you think about. And when you say that, people think it can't be all you think about. And you're like, it's the thought that's overlaying everything. So it's get up in the morning, okay, bit rough from the night before, go to work, right, I'll just get through this and I can have a pint at lunchtime. That'll settle me. Get a pint. Then about 3 o'clock, it's okay, good, right, what have I got to do rest of the day? Okay, I better start arranging now who I'm going to go out with tonight. And I'll give you just a wee silly example. I remember once my ex-wife, before we were married and we were getting married, she wanted to go to the wedding show at the SECC, which I think is something they have all the time. And I'm like, it was Sunday afternoon. I'm like, I'm not going to any wedding show. And she's like, they've got a bar. I'm like, all right, okay. So that was the sort of thing. I remember one time I'm embarrassed. I mean, I did it many a time, but we were in France on holiday. And there was us and this other couple, and it was like we were in Normandy as we were staying. So listen, we want to go and see the Normandy beaches, no problem. And I'm it's getting to about 2:00, and I'm going, should we not be thinking about hitting the pub soonish? And they're going, well, we want to go and see the Resistance Museum. Okay. So we got into the Resistance Museum. These wonderful, brave people, that did amazing things. And I say to the guy, how long does this take, the tour? And he says, about 2 hours. And I'm like, fuck, that's longer than you's lasted. And it's basically just, all I'm thinking about is that's another 2 hours before I can go to the pub. And that's how you calculate things. When you get money, it's, right, pay the bills, and then I've got this much to drink, and I've got X amount of, you become like a mathematician. I've got X amount of days, so I can get, if I go and get a carry out here, and here, and then I can go out these nights, and you would find money anyway to do it. That's the thing. So it just dominates absolutely every aspect of your life. When I go to a gig, right, I have to stand in a certain place, so I'm near the bar, looking at my watch, 10:30, right, I'm going to leave here in 5 minutes because then I can get last orders at this pub or that pub, knowing all the places that stay open late or open early. I mean, my geography around Glasgow now is buggered. I used to know Glasgow inside out by pubs. So like, the team will say to me now, we're meeting here. And I'll go, well, where is that? And Cammy, who you'll know, Cheryl, the listeners might know from the pod, Cammy will say to me, it's the old... this pub, because he realises the only way that I'll realise where we're going is if he names me a pub from the era where I was going into pubs. So it's just utterly dominant in all of your thinking. And you just, but again, you don't know any different. That's the thing. I didn't know any different. It's the same with like blackouts. I can't remember an awful lot. There's huge gaps in my memories. As I once said, the thing about being a drinker is you lose little details like names, faces in the 1990s. And a big part of that is I always, had blackouts when I was drinking, but I just assumed everybody else did because it didn't seem unusual to me to wake up and go, I can't remember what the fuck I was doing last night. And it's only afterwards that you realise, well, hang on, that's not normal. Right, that's not how you're supposed to do it. But at the time, especially at that age, when you're teenagers and then your 20s, you kind of just feel this is the sort of life you should be having, and you should be getting out there and going to places and doing that. Now I realise that going to places and doing things does mean more than just going to places and sitting in a pub. But that was sort of all I thought about.
I've heard you speak about your ex-wife on countless shows, the David and Todd show, earlier days on that with Scott Vandermack. You've always spoke about that first relationship, and there's lots of stories about I don't want to speak for her, but maybe say the two of you being particularly drunk at various times, traveling places, and a lot of drink being involved. And when I met my first wife, I say first wife because I'm just about to acquire a second, which is the exclusive information here for the show.
But congratulations!
That's just a few days ago. Thank you.
Second one's always better because you know at the start all the things that you didn't like and that you won't do. So no, you need to get the first one. For anybody listening, get the first one out the road quickly, and then you can get the one that lasts.
We've definitely got a whole show on first and second partners to come. Absolutely, that's a whole thing. Could even be a series. But yeah, I sank 2/3 of a bottle of champagne after that event, so alcohol can still come upon me when it suits it. But I was thinking about relationships. When I met my first wife, that was when my drinking was at its worst. I was having the blackouts that you speak of, the nights out where you wake up and check the receipts, and that's how you worked out what happened or where you were. In your story of the first marriage, though, again, I don't want to mention anything about your wife, but the environment seemed to be an enabling environment for you. Is that right?
Yes, but I don't want to try and use that as an excuse or to in any way take away my culpability of the things that I did. And it's all right me saying, the drink did it to me. Yeah, but I did it to them, right? And I need to take responsibility for any of the things that I said or did and the ways that I behaved back then. And with my wife, we met at university. She very similar family background to mine in terms of like drinking. Her family, there was a lot of alcohol kicking about in that as well. And yeah, we always went out. She though would know when to stop, and I couldn't. I just couldn't. I didn't go for a pint. I have never gone for a pint. And as any alcohol will tell you, the worst thing in the world is one drink, because it just sets you off. And if you're sitting there, you're like a caged animal. So when I went to the pub, I was getting drunk. And again, things that I thought were normal. And, that really weasel phrase that I didn't mean it. Right. Well, no, but you still fucking did it. And that's the thing. And like, there was problems, but we were together really young. We were teenagers. We were 18 when we met, and we gave it a good go. And we definitely tried our best, but we just ran out of road in the end. And obviously, my alcoholism didn't help. And I take responsibility for the parts in the relationship that went wrong. As I say, I think we'd just grown completely. You're a totally different person when you're 30 than you were when you're 18, and that's what had happened. We're just growing in two completely different directions. But yeah, when we moved in together, and we moved into the city, and lots of friends around us. South side of Glasgow at the time was fantastic. You're just up the road. You're working in the city, and that's what it was. You'd come in from work, get your shit together, and then out for something to eat and a few drinks with friends, or going to a gig, or that's what it was. And then one of the worst things that can happen to you is that everybody else grew up and I didn't. They suddenly they're all going, well, we need to move for the city. We want a new build with a garden because we want to have kids. And kids, what? That's going to get in the way of you. And you're so selfish, as an alcoholic, that'll upset my plans. That will upset me. How can you be doing this to me? And so then you're resentful, and then you actually move away, in my case, from your friends, and you start with your drinking pals. And those relationships aren't anywhere near as healthy, and the people don't care for you anymore near as much. It's just people you get pissed with. But that's kind of what happened there with just, people quite rightly were saying, right, we're, now coming out of our 20s, it's now time to settle down. And I was never, I don't think I was built for that sort of life anyway, but I certainly wasn't ready for it at that point in my life.
In terms of you, so that was the woman who became your wife and then your ex-wife. You kind of touched on it there, David, but your friendships, it sounds like it had a big impact on the people who had been your friends for a long time and your ongoing relationships with them.
Oh God, yeah. This is one thing that I really do feel bad about and have tried to atone for over the years, is that the amount of danger I put friends in. Because if you were coming out with me, you were drinking with me. And a lot of them couldn't drink the way I could drink. Well, none of them could. And yet, if you were coming out with me, then that's what was happening. You weren't coming out and having a couple of pints. You were coming out and getting hammered. And if I had to use emotional blackmail, I would do it. Anything at all to get you to stay, I would do. And the other thing as well is that friends would try to keep up with me when I was drinking. And that wasn't a good idea either. A lot of them would end up sort of going home, and I'd get a text the next morning going, oh, I came in and I spewed everywhere and I'm in trouble now with my partner. And it's like, sorry. But yeah, you definitely did that. And then, of course, you're undependable as a friend, and you say things when you're drunk. The most bullshit phrase ever is in vino veritas, that when you're drunk, you tell the truth. It's absolute bullshit. You say any old shite that comes into your head, and a lot of the time it can be very hurtful. And unfortunately for me, one of my natural talents is I've got a very, very good ability to seize upon a person's really, deepest insecurities and use it against them. So I'd wake up in the morning and I'd reduce people to tears, and I don't remember how or why. I'm not upset with this person that I can think of, and yet I've done something truly, truly terrible to them. So yeah, the people that, and I was very fortunate that no one ever really kind of, I've had enough of you type thing. And it's an interesting one because, I would meet my friend Ross when I was at NARSA. And he said to me, he goes, you were never that bad. You were always a really happy, upbeat drunk. And I thought, well, thankfully, again, I don't remember. I've never seen me drunk, thankfully. and it's not on camera. Another thing I'm very glad about the era I grew up in. But I maybe was, externally, but then to the people that you're closest to, you can be a total prick. And at times I was, and my wife now, Sally, she was my friend back then, and she'd tell you, some of the times I'd absolutely reduce it to tears, and then she'd speak to me the next time she saw me about it, and she goes, and it was quite clear you'd no idea what I was talking about, and that's a terrible burden to have, because they've suffered it and you haven't. You've dealt it, you've caused it, but you don't remember it, so you don't have the experience or even the cringe or embarrassment of it. So yeah, afterwards, when you get sober, you do have a lot of making up to do, if people are kind enough to give you a chance to do it, which I was very fortunate that friends and family were.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. In terms of the marriage you're referring to, the first one ended more naturally. People age, people mature, and some of those early younger relationships, they don't last into our 30s, as many of us are finding out now. I'm 39. A lot of people around me are finding this out. But you said that you were very lucky that people maybe gave you opportunity or chances to make amends, but there must have been was there any important relationships that were unrecoverable, or any sort of social situations that you really did burn?
Oh God, so many. And again, I'm quite fortunate that people seem to have a kind of a long rope when it came to me. I think part of it as well is, after a while, it just becomes, that's just David. He's just pissed. He's just on something. And they begin to almost write it off. And that kind of carried on. I remember when I got sober, a friend of mine, it was, a long-term friend from childhood, from school. And it was about 5 years in that eventually, and it was actually Sally, said to him, she goes, "You still think of David as your lovable fuck-up friend, and he isn't." you know? And I think that
Still
was
very lovable, I think, David. Still very
thank
lovable.
you. But that I think I was fortunate because I wasn't violent, and I never, I wasn't, out causing problems with police or anything of that nature that maybe would have been a bit more serious. So I think that, they just sort of saw me as, their kind of lovable fuck up friend that occasionally would go a bit far, but you could just, the next day I would be, contrite and feeling sorry. So, and I think people quite like having that in their life, because if there's somebody that's visibly doing worse than you, you can always say, "Oh, well, could be worse. It could be like him." So I think that there is actually a bit of comfort in that for people, but that inside you're dying, and that's the worst of it. But I think it really was only, at home. And the other thing as well is I had loads of friends, loads of drinking partners, so they're maybe only seeing it once or twice a week, if you know what I mean. So they're only thinking, "Oh, he was pissed a couple of times last week, what's the problem?" But to my partner, she's seeing it every single night. And as she said, I didn't realise this until afterwards, until I got sober. The biggest problem was the uncertainty. And she said to me once, she goes, the problem is that you say, "I'm going out for a drink and I'll be back at 10. And she says, "And sometimes you're back at 10 and sometimes you're back on Thursday. And I never know when that's going to happen." And I thought, God, can you imagine living with that constant fear? And that's, the kind of thing that being an alcoholic that you don't take into account, because you think, as I say, you're very selfish, and you think, well, it's only me I'm hurting. It's not.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask, David, my first, obviously, what we now do bits and pieces around press, etc., and I know you from there, I know you from listening to Heart and Hand as well, but I think my first introduction to you would have been through your work with the Trust.
Yes.
Did your addiction have any kind of impact on that work or your actual career, your 9-to-5 job?
Career, definitely. I mean, I hated the job I was in, and I hate the industry I was in is probably more accurate. I absolutely despised it, and that doesn't help. And it was literally, I am doing this to get money, and to get money to enjoy the lifestyle that I want to enjoy. So there's that, right? And then definitely, I mean, one job I got sacked for because I was so fucking unreliable, like turning up whenever, pissing off early to go to the pub, getting hammered at lunchtime, and I got sacked, and they were quite right to do it. But again, you just, when you're in the midst of addiction, you're like, oh, well, it's, their loss, idiots. Okay, I maybe cut a few corners. You're very good at you're very good at bringing the line closer to you, whenever you say, right, this is the line, I will not cross this line, and then you get through it and you're like, right, I'll just move the line back a little bit then. This is now the line. So yeah, a massive impact on that. I'm very glad. One of the great things so I'm so lucky though, in a way, and I know that might sound a little odd. People going, he's lucky he's an alcoholic. I'm not lucky I'm an alcoholic, but I'm lucky that I know, and I'm lucky in that it gave me a second chance at everything, because I know people who just carry on because they're a bit miserable, but they're maybe 5 out of 10 miserable. And they think, well, I could try and change it, but then what if it doesn't work and I end up being 6 or 7 out of 10 miserable? And I might have done that, and I might have stayed in this industry that I hated and just, well, I need to be miserable at work every day because that's just reality. When you kind of lose everything, which I did, and you're starting again from scratch, at first it's a little intimidating, but then comes a sense of absolute freedom of, I don't need to do that. Actually, I'm not the only thing that I felt really trapped when I worked in that industry. And then I realized the only thing that's trapping me is me. And I'll try something else. It might not work, but I'll try it. And if it doesn't work, I'll try something else. And that's the thing about that. It liberated me to go off and try different. I mean, the podcast wouldn't exist if that hadn't happened, because I know I'd have been going, I could probably do that, but I'll not bother. What if it goes wrong? And instead, you end up in a position where you just go, I'll try it. It might fail. And that's the other thing as well, is that I mentioned at the start, that insecurity that I had. I don't have that now. And it's not an arrogance. I'm very well aware of my flaws, and they are many. And I try and work on the really bad ones as much as possible. But I think that after you've been through something like that, then you realise, okay, that was like all the worst things that could have happened to me have happened to me, and I got through it. And it's not that you then always have a good day afterwards, because you don't. I have bad days and I have bad things that happen in my life like anybody else, but I don't sit and worry about them anymore. And my view is, when these challenges come, I will get through them. I know that I can do this. I've done it before. So it liberates you from a lot of fears and worries that maybe people who don't get to that extreme, they sort of live with it. And I was able to just go, no, I'm going to ditch all of this stuff. And that's one of the advantages, if you like, of sobriety.
I think addiction, Dave, from not just on this podcast, any experiences I've had personally and seen in people around me my whole life, or anything else you could look up on television and shows, there's lots of information about it. Addiction for me often builds the more we avoid a certain feeling, or we're in avoidance of something. And you've said there was no major traumas historically for you as in the family. You've talked about a little bit people sort of hiding that unhappiness. Was there something that, or what were you avoiding perhaps by becoming addicted? Just you?
Me, I didn't like me. I didn't feel that I fitted in. I was very, very insecure. And it was like, as I say, I was born just feeling a wee bit self-conscious. And it meant that it happened everywhere I went. And you know that phrase, I was out my head, I was out my box, whatever you want to say, I was out my head. That's what I would say. So I'm going to get off my head. I'm going to get out of my head. It's because I couldn't live in it. And the world's too big for me, right? And I know people like this now. The world's too big for them, and their brain goes at 1,000 miles an hour, and all addicts will tell you that racing brain, that's one of the things. And you catastrophize everything. And your brain is just, it never stops. It's screaming at you all the time. And then it does things like, well, if this happens, then that'll happen. And what if that happens? That means that might happen. And suddenly you've created this entirely fictitious scenario in your head. and you're now having to, go through it and deal with it, and it doesn't exist. And that's one of the reasons why you self-medicate, you drink and you take drugs, because it's like, I need my brain to just shut the fuck up for a night. And any feelings that you have, I didn't like feeling things. So whenever I did, I just drowned it. And that was always my first point of call. So yeah, absolutely. Everyone is kind of running from something. And I think for a lot of people, at its base, it's insecurity. And it is just that feeling of being a little bit alien in every environment that you go into, and feeling a little bit awkward. And I think that feeling, that if you can deal with it in other ways, and I think nowadays people can talk about it and say, I feel it is. But, when I was growing up, there was no way I was going to say to anybody, I'm actually quite self-conscious and I lack, social confidence. And instead I put on a front and got pissed.
Yeah, you've said this a few times about you feeling different to other people, not quite fitting in, wanting to avoid yourself. This lack of social confidence or a lack of self-belief, maybe. And there's listening to you for the years, well over a decade, and connecting to some various parallels, and like the fact that my username is JC Divergence, and that's kind of like grown into from this idea that, all right, maybe my brain's not the same as other people, without having myself any need or requirement to seek a formal diagnosis for anything on that front, whether it's on the autism, OCD, ADHD, these sort of things. But I can connect to and see in myself so many tick boxes or check boxes or sort of like pie charts of things that make sense to me. Your stories keep coming up with things that I would be looking like there's a neurodivergent tick here and here and here and here. Is that ever a word? It wouldn't have been 20, 30 years ago. It's much more common and prevalent now. Is that something, especially on ADHD, I'm interested in, because your collections and these sort of things really are interesting. You collect everything of a thing. You have a special interest, and you collect all of that thing. Your shirts and everything. I've got my home shirts from 1987 as well. Is this a word or a topic that like is interesting to you now? Has anyone ever mentioned this before?
It's not. It's something that's crossed my mind, but it's something I've never investigated. It for the simple reason being is that I don't want to give myself an excuse for things. And again, as I mentioned, there are flaws that I have. If it's it's a great piece of advice once at AA, and Glasgow AA is the best AA in the world, by the way, because it's not what you see on the television, right? They're basically sit down, shut the fuck up, and if you listen and do what we tell you, you'll get sober. And they call a spade a spade. And I remember once after I got sober, I was buying loads and loads of cans of Pepsi Max, right? Because just, I was so in the habit of getting up, going to the fridge, opening a can. So I did that. And then eventually I remember saying to one of the guys at the meeting, I said, I'm worried about this. Dad, I'm drinking so much Pepsi Max. And he said, have you ever pissed the bed after drinking too much Pepsi Max? I said, no. He went, well, then you've nothing to worry about. And what he meant was that, we will have these little things because you've got these addictions and you've got that personality. Turn it to things that are harmless. Turn it to things that aren't going to cause a problem. I think if it was, if it was causing me problems, if I wasn't sleeping because of things, or I was excluding family because of, obsessions, then I'd have to go and get checked out. But it's such an interesting point because you mentioned there are people, you'll hear people my age and above, and they'll say, oh, there was no mental health issues when I was young. No, men just used to live in the pub and knock fuck out their wives. They were totally well adjusted. Of course there was, right? We just didn't know it and we just didn't talk about it. So I'm glad now that people are being more confident, more able to do it. But yeah, for me, I think that I've got that type of personality, and you're absolutely right. Like when I get into something, then it's total. You know, I immerse myself in it,
My other
and it's
favorite part of
non-stop.
this is your music collection. This always comes up on the David and Todd shows, how your
Yeah.
taste in music is the correct choice in
Oh,
music and no one else's.
that's the one thing I'm fascist about. Yeah, absolutely. That again, I'm very, you know, as Zane will tell you, I'm very live and let live. That Stevie, who you had on last week, and Sheryl knows well. Stevie will say to me, "How come you don't care about this stuff? You know, things that are really annoying him." And I'll go, "Because I just don't. Right? I can't change it. It doesn't affect me, so I'm just going to let it go." But music's the one thing. No, I am right always, all
I'm
the time.
sorry. I'm just going to say, no, sorry, David. I'm going to say 3 words to you, right?
Right.
Hall and Oates.
It's, you know, it's the one. This is one of these fundamental differences between men and women, and why men are more often right. But yeah, all joking aside, no, I just, you know, God gave me absolutely perfect music taste, and yep. One thing I have noticed over the years is people don't like being told, even when you're doing it for their own good, that their music taste is shite. That has caused me issues over the years. But yeah, no, and again, like, I'm not somebody that can just listen to a song. My wife can. She can listen to a song and go, I like that song, and occasionally listen to it. If I like a song, it gets played non-stop for days. Then I have to find out who played on that song, right? What else have this band released? Are there any interviews? And that's, you know, something that I think is very much a neuro thing. But I think as well with men in general, I think we're all a little bit like, have you ever noticed if you're at a restaurant with your friends, the guys will generally see their cutlery, they'll arrange it so it's all at perfect angles. I've noticed this over the years, and I'm like,
Oh my
yeah,
God, guilty.
yeah, exactly. Whereas again, Sheryl, women who are much cooler than men can just go, you know what, right? I don't need the knife right now. I'll pick it up when I do. And it is just that. I think, you know, we love lists and we love collecting things, and I think there's a strong presence in everyone. And like I say, as long as it's harmless, as long as it's not something that is causing me or anyone around me any issues, then it's fine to do it. If I was obsessed with something, and say I was not spending enough time at home with Sally, or I was ignoring her or ignoring my family to do this thing, then I think then it's an issue. You know, and I'm sure there's a few husbands and wives out there who've lost their partner to golf that might understand where I'm coming from there. But no, I just tend to think that I accepted a long time ago that I am a bit weird, right? And not in a nasty sense, and not in a, but a lot of things, when people find out about me, they're quite surprised that I don't drive. I never have, and I never will. That I don't have kids, you know, through choice. For example, I have 5 dogs, you know, and if anybody comes to Sally, and I'm lucky because she's weird as well. If you come to Sally and I's house, I mean, it's like a cross between an auction house, a music museum, you know, a gadget factory, because we just do stuff that we want to. And again, it's a big part of that. For me, it was my alcoholism sort of freed it up. My wife, she won't mind me saying, she is bipolar, and, you know, she had to find that out and go through all the process round about the same time I was getting sober, actually, and we were there for each other. That we've just decided, you know what, this is who we are. We don't really need to follow any kind of social norms. We live quietly. We don't bother anybody else. It works for us. Fuck it. And I think that once you get to a stage like that in your life where you genuinely don't care about perception, then it's such a freeing place to be, because I really cared for a large part of my life about perception and what people thought about me.
David, you mentioned earlier that AA was a huge help to you. Can I ask you about those kind of first few weeks and first few months of recovery? What was that like?
Yes. It was frightening, because, like, going to the first meeting was such a big loaded word, isn't it? Alcoholism, alcoholic. It's such a big thing. And I remember, this is all I do, right? I drink, I go out, and now I'm not going to be able to do it. So I remember going to the first meeting, and it was at Shawlands Parish Church on a Sunday. and I went to this meeting. I was very lucky that a friend of mine, his father-in-law, had been sober. And so I coming out of my last bender when I really knew that I was going to die. It was either, get some help or die. Either, I'm going to kill myself or my body's going to kill me anyway. And I phoned this guy Rod, and he said to me, "Have you got a problem with your drinking?" And I said, "Well, sometimes." He went, "Have you got a problem with your drinking?" And I went, "Yes." And he said, "You're in for a really painful few days because you're going to get the DTs. Get through that, and then I'll come and get you, and we'll go to a meeting." And the next 3 days were fucking horrendous, right? It was like, if you've ever seen Trainspotting, it was like when Renton's going through the withdrawal. Oh my God, just sweats, the DT. I was drinking, he told me this, thank God he did, to drink, concentrated juice, diluting juice. He said, get that and drink it straight because your body's craving the sugar. And I was doing that, and oh my God, just awful. And then he came and got me. My head is up my arse at this point, and he said, just clear all that, right? Just for an hour and a half, don't think about anything. Sit and listen to the guy who's talking tonight, and don't look for differences. Just see if there's anything at all that strikes a chord with you. Anything. And I remember the guy was sitting and he was talking about going on a night out, but having to have a carry out in the house to come back to. Having to, right? Otherwise, you couldn't enjoy yourself when you were out because you'd be sitting thinking all night. Oh my God. And I thought, I do that. That absolutely. And then I just started going to meetings every day and not thinking beyond, I'm just going to be sober today. I'm just not going to drink and I'm just going to get through it. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, your head begins to clear a little bit and you actually start to feel physically good, which was a revelation to me. I hadn't felt physically good since I was a child. I was used to being in some sort of state. I was either drunk, hungover, asleep, or trying to get drunk. So began to feel physically good for, as I say, the first time since I was a kid. And then it's just a case of, right, let's just keep going and keep doing it. And yeah, it was just absolutely that. The first few weeks are a bit of a blur. Because it was just put one foot in front of the other, just put one foot in front of the other. And I've been I've never, I'll be 17 years sober in July, and I've never come close. A lot of people say, they had a drink in their hand at one point, or they had a long dark night. I haven't, because I've always just been, right, okay, I just need to stay sober today. That's the plan. And anyone will tell you now that way of thinking has absolutely saved my life, because I remember that first meeting. I'm sitting there going, I'll not be able to have a drink at Cammy, my nephew. I'll not be able to have a drink at Cammy's wedding. He was 2. But that's what I mean about your brain just coming up with these thoughts. And now I'm very good at, maybe to the point annoys people, where they'll say, what are you doing in 2 weeks? I don't know. And I don't. I know what I'm doing today. I'll have a vague idea of what I'm doing tomorrow, and that is about it. And that's all I focus on. And it works for me.
Yeah. You said that idea that you're either going to die or kill yourself is, I don't want to gloss over that. That's, I think that's the biggest thing that's come up so far in this conversation. It's something that I experienced not through myself, gratefully, but through a lad a few years older than me in the village that I'm from in Lancashire. And this sort of situation he was always the drinker. He was always sort of the one that would be smashed, trying to find somewhere to go after hours and this sort of thing. Showing up to play the football on the Saturday, absolutely steaming, playing a blinder in that Gascoigne sort of way, and then getting back on it for another 2 days. Jenko, bless him. He did go sober, but then he did fall back on. And this may have happened a few times, but there came a time where the drinker of the man he was before he got sober, the man who had been sober for a wee while, and the body couldn't cope anymore, despite what the hand and the brain were trying to do. And he unfortunately passed away. and just a drunken, I guess, from drink on one night where no one would have expected it. There'll be people listening who have tried or are trying, whether they're AA level or not, to improve their behavior, or they may know someone else. Like your recovery there, you managed to stay clean and go. You stayed and stayed
Aye.
and stayed and still have done to this day. What what could you say to someone who might be struggling with that part? You've said, you know, one step at a time, but what could you say to someone who's maybe going to fall back or has fallen back a few times to keep them going one step at a time, maybe?
Well, on the falling back a few times thing, first of all, see if you start drinking, as soon as you've gone AA the first time, you are never going to enjoy your drinking again. So there's no point doing it. You are never, ever going to enjoy it again because you didn't know before that there was a different way, and now you do. And I've seen people fall back, as you say, and have slips. The other thing is that what I wouldn't say to them is, oh, never mind, right? Because that just enables it. If you give people absolution for it, you need to say, are you serious about this? Do you want to get so? If you've made your choice, I mentioned before my uncle that died, he'd made his choice. You know, he was going to keep drinking, and you know, I didn't agree with it, but you have to respect it. That was his decision. If you've made a decision to be sober, be sober. And that sounds a little harsh, and it kind of meant to. And again, I mentioned in Glasgow AA, that's one of the things about it. I remember this guy that was coming into our meeting, and he was, you know, slipping a lot, and because I was new and fresh faced and everything, and I'm like, oh, never mind, you know, come on, we'll come back next week, we'll have another go at it, kind of thing. Eventually, one of the older guys said to him, took him aside and said, stop fucking wasting our time. You're either serious about getting help or you're not, and if you are, we'll help you, and if you're not, there are people who need our help and need our time. And I think that sort of jolted him into it, because if you treat someone who's an alcoholic like, if you baby them, they'll take it, because we're sympathy junkies. You know, that's the other thing. You know, those strong men in films, I don't want your sympathy. Alkies do. We really want your sympathy. We want you to feel sorry for us and let us do what the fuck we want. That's what we want, you know, with no questions asked. So I think you need to kind of say to yourself, well, why do I keep slipping, right? Have you made the decision genuinely that you're not going to drink again? And ask, you know, and again, it's that double question. Are you serious about you want to stop drinking? Yes. Are you really serious? And if the answer is no, there is a bit of me that is holding on to the thought that one day I can drink again, then you will drink again. It's that simple. So what you have to do is chuck yourself into it with the same enthusiasm and with the same attitude as you chucked yourself into your drinking. You know that the path that you're on does not lead anywhere good. You know that all it brings back is misery to you and to the people around you. And you have a decision to make. You can't have 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You're either all in or you're not. You know, you're either giving it all you've got or you're giving up. So be serious about it. You know, don't waste your own time or anybody else's. If you're planning on drinking, and you will know at the back of your mind, that wee voice that you can't cover over, the wee one that just sits there and tells you the truth. If you're going to drink, then go ahead. You know, you're an adult. You make your own mind. If you're serious about it, there are lots of people, literally millions of people who want to help you and who are there to help you. That's what AA is. That's what other support groups are, GA and NA. They are there to help you. But if you haven't decided, and I see it all the time, you know, it's people who, my wife wants me to cut back, and I just say to them, then there's no point you being here, you know, because you don't want to do it, so you're not going to. Until you've made the decision, rock bottom, that's what we call it, until you've hit your rock bottom. And the first time you go into might not be your rock bottom. So far for me, luckily, it has been. But for other people, it may take you to fall further and further. But certainly, you know, with me, and this is where I think that, you know, I mentioned before, my sort of self-esteem, if you like, it played a part. I remember my sponsor said to me that only 5% of people who come into AA don't have a slip. And I said to him, I'm going to be one of those, you know, straight away. That'll be me. And he said to me, and I knew you would. He said, because I knew your arrogance would make you do that. And in a way, it's acted as a shield. You know, I'm not going to do this. And I think that, you know, for me, that was always a motivating factor. I am going to do this. And yeah, I mentioned there before about when I was sitting, did my last drink. I'd been on a massive bender, it was like 4-day bender, and my wife had left, quite rightly, understandably, and I just that was a job I'd just been fired from a couple of months before, so I didn't have to work. And I remember sort of coming to out of a blackout. And James, you'll know what I mean by this. You can be conscious, but in a blackout, and then suddenly you sort of look round and you're like, "Oh, I'm here," and you've been on autopilot. And I was in Morrison's at Crossmylooth in Shawlands, the bottom of the road I lived on, and I was buying a dozen beers. They were quite nice, expensive beers, and a bottle of very expensive wine. And there was a wee guy in front of me, a wee Jakey, as I thought at the time, and he was buying one can of super lager. And I'm going, check this fucking Jakey. Now remember, I'm in the same clothes I've had on for 4 days. I haven't been home. I've got a beard you could lose a badger in. And I'm sitting there judging this guy. So I went home and I opened a beer and I took a drink, but I knew, I'm like, oh, the gas in this is going to make me sick. I'm going to be sick if I drink this. I'll open the wine. There's no bubbles in wine. And I opened the wine, I poured it, and I took a sip, and it just hit me. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And I sort of looked around, you know, empty house, and looked at myself and saw myself. And I thought, is this it? You know, this is what you're going to be? You know, you think you're special, and yet look at you. You're no different to that guy. If anything, actually, you're worse, because he's at least honest about it. You're not. You're sitting thinking, going, well, the wine I'm buying costs 20 quid, so I can't be an alcoholic. You fucking are. And again, that's what I mean about, like, when I get a depression, I don't feel despair or sadness, or I just feel nothing. And that's what I felt at that point. And it was like, I'm not particularly wanting to kill myself, but I'm not particularly bothered about being alive either. And that's a pretty scary realization. And it was at that moment I thought, I either need to do something, or I might as well just go and throw myself onto the train line down at Crossmylooth, because this is pointless and I'm not going to live like this. I'm not going to live pointlessly. And again, when I say pointlessly, I don't mean that I'm going to change the world, because I'm not. But if I can't be happy and make my family around me happy, then my life is pointless. So what's the fucking point? I might as well not be here. And yeah, it was a close call, because it could have went one way or the other. But thankfully, as I say, I picked up the phone.
David, you have been extremely generous with the time that you have given us tonight. I know beyond any shadow of a doubt that what you have shared with us very, very bravely and openly and honestly will help so many people. Can I ask you one final question in terms of and a lot of the feedback we've had even from Stevie's pod was, this isn't me, but this is my pal, or this isn't me, but actually I'm watching my sister do this. If somebody listening tonight was worried about a loved one, where should they start, or what should they do next?
Well, the first thing to do if you are a family member or a friend is contact an organisation called Al-Anon, which is for the families of alcoholics. And it's a support network, and it's wonderful. The work that those people do is absolutely amazing. Because, you know, they don't have a problem, but the problem of someone else has got into their life. And this is, you know, they support each other to deal with that and you know, to help the person. So that'd be the first thing I'd say. There's no point doing, you know, an intervention, because the person is not going to change until they're ready to change, unfortunately. That's the thing. You can say to them, but they'll just start lying to you. I know that for a fact. I love my family very much, and I would have lied. I did lie. I would have walked over them if they were ill in the street to get a drink. So the person needs to be ready for it. What you can do is let them know that you're here and if they want to get better, you are there to help them. And you don't need to put up with the behaviour. That's another thing. You don't need to put up with it. You can say, look, I think you've got a drink problem. You might not. I think you've got a gambling problem. You might not. But I'm sure deep down you actually do know the truth, because they will. That's the thing. They will know. I don't really want to be a part of this. But when you decide that you want to change, I will be here for you. And you can do that. That's not in any way people think it's being disloyal or whatever. It's really not. It's actually helping them more than you know, because it's forcing them to confront the one person that can help them, which is themselves. And then, if they do come to you and they're serious about it, then by all means, yeah, absolutely be there for them. That's been a wonderful friend or family member. But I think that it's absolutely key that the person involved does it for themselves, because anyone who's listened to this who has some worries about it might be saying to himself, well, I'm not as bad as that. I've not done 4 and 5 day benders. I've not done this or that. I've not went out on a Thursday and woke up on Sunday morning in Dundee in a car with 4 people I didn't know, which happened to me once. But you do know, in the back of your mind, whether or not you are going to, whether or not you need help. And it is so much better to ask for it. I can promise you, I don't use the term good luck, right? Because it's not about luck, it's about work. If you put the work in, you'll get sober. And I can promise you 100%, I can guarantee it, that your life will get better. I can't say you'll not have another bad day, because you will at some point, but you'll be able to handle it a lot better. And not only will your life improve, but the life of everyone around you will improve. And as I say, I've been 17 years sober, and I've had some pretty tough times in that. I've had bereavement, I've had serious illness to both me and to family members. But I've never, ever once woke up and went, do you know what, I wish I was hungover. And that's the thing. You become a person who can do all the stuff that you don't think you're capable of, and all the stuff you're beating yourself up about not being able to do, and not being the person you want to be, and turning to drink to relieve it. You can be that person. I will never, ever be the person that I want to be. I know that. I'll never, ever achieve the level I want to be. But I keep fucking trying. And that's enough.
David, I can't add any more words. I don't want to add any more words to what you've just been saying in the previous 2 answers, especially. Thank you so much for all the time you've given us tonight. Thank you for the air time that you give us on Heart and Hand, as well as Stevie does on Four Lads. And thank you. I guess grateful that you are sober as well. That's the most important thing. We're all grateful you're here.
Absolutely.
I think, as the listeners. Sheryl.
Davey, thank you so much. I just repeat what I said before. I know how open and how honest and brave you are about this, and it will make a massive, I'm sure it has made a massive difference to anyone who's listened to you up until now. But I hope that sitting down and actually having this conversation and laying everything bare with us will help even more people. But I really am sure it is. Thank you so much for your time, David. I really, really appreciate it.
No, it was a pleasure. And anyone who's listening, it sometimes can help to talk to somebody, that isn't a family member or isn't, close. And I'm somebody you kind of know. So if you ever want to get in touch with me, it's david@heartland.co.uk. Everything is confidential. That's part of my AA thing. I assure you, everything is, anything you say to me is 100% confidential. And just before I go, just in case, anyone, I don't feel embarrassed by this. I don't feel weird about it. It just is. In the same way I've got a bad back, I'm an alcoholic. It's just a thing. And I'm not embarrassed about it, and you shouldn't be either. And you certainly shouldn't be embarrassed about getting help, because, if you fell and broke your leg, you would go and see somebody that could fix your leg. Well, this is just another thing like that. So, yeah, I'm not proud of it, but I've realised as I've got older that alcohol, in one way or another, alcoholism has kind of defined me. It defined who I was as a child. It defined who I was when I was drinking, and my recovery defines who I am now. And that's okay. I'm cool with that. And you will be too.
Sheryl, I don't want to say wow, because there's so much, it sounds like it's impressive, but I think that's a really powerful listen. I didn't expect anything less from Davey there.
Yeah, very much like when we had Stevie with us last week. Two guys who are, completely synonymous with Rangers, who do a lot of work around the club, who are very well known for the role that they play in pushing for change and, asking people to take accountability, but actually taking accountability themselves, James, I just think is really, really powerful. I think being able to share their stories as, I don't want to say middle age because they'll probably both fall out with me, but guys of a certain age who have lived and who are very well known is so valuable to be able to put out there, and I'm sure so many people will be able to take so much from their stories.
Yeah, I found the part so interesting where David said alcohol gave him so many good times as well. Like this is not a sob story, bad story. And I guess I think he'll probably be quite grateful himself, like he said, that he didn't have so many bad things that he did that other people can become involved in. And I guess in my case, yeah, I can see the good times. I was having a blast on the back of those supporters buses, having a blast, going wherever and doing whatever I was doing up until about the age of 30. And then it started to calm down a bit. But I think listening to it like that, I'm probably grateful myself that I didn't have to hit rock bottom to reduce the volume. I didn't have to hit a rock bottom I didn't need to ask for help. I think I'm also grateful that I'm able to gradually remove this from a problem into something that is truly occasional, that I will celebrate on occasion, sometimes with more than one alcoholic drink. And there won't be too many people who drink like that. And I think it was just really a really good chance, especially as we're involved with Rangers and Scottish football, that is synonymous with alcohol consumption and alcohol abuse and alcohol violence. That we heard from someone who can say, if this is a problem for you, you need to stop it and you need to choose to stop it. And I really appreciated the brutal harshness of that choice of stop or carry on, but choose one of these options and don't waste the time of people who can help you, depending on which way you're going to choose. So yeah, really, really important and powerful. But I should not keep you on for too much longer, Sheryl. Thank you so much as well for joining and participating and helping working on this together to create these incredible shows. If you are listening or watching us here on Heart and Hand or Four Lads Had a Dream, and you've been affected by anything in this episode, please remember that you can contact the Samaritans and speak to someone confidentially right now on 116-123. Please also check the notes on YouTube or Patreon for either respective platform to check the various links. We're going to have links for Alcoholics Anonymous, from the Al-Anon, which is also the family support from Alcoholics Anonymous, as well as the anonymous submissions for Sheryl and I to read and look at, not just relating to alcohol and addiction, but for anything else you would like to bring up to be discussed here on Heart and Health. And if you contact David, if you contact someone like myself through that anonymous submission box, we'll always be grateful to point you in the right direction of the appropriate service if you do not know who to speak to. Sheryl, thank you so much for coming on again and working on this with me.
No, thank you. And I'm just going to take us back to something you mentioned very, very quickly, because I would like to offer you and your beautiful fiance, and I'm allowed to say it now because you've actually made reference to it, that you got engaged to a beautiful, marvelous, smart, witty, clever, complex woman at the weekend. And you both deserve the most wonderful and happy and... oh, I can't even describe it. You're just a lovely, lovely couple, and I'm delighted.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the use of the word complex there. And yes, I drank alcohol in celebration of my successful proposal, which I can talk about now because this is Saturday and it's a week after the fact. And we've dealt with it in all the way of people that need to be spoken to about it. In my head, in my special pattern brain, in all the correct order, I need to speak to this person, then this person, then this person, then this person. And then maybe once I've done all those things, it will go on social media. So yes, we can reference it in the show. And thank you very much, Sheryl, for speaking with that. And that will wrap us up for this episode. I've been James, she's been Sheryl, and this has been Heart and Health, and we'll be speaking to you again very soon.